If you grew up in Britain between the 1960s and 1980s, you'll remember when playgrounds were brilliantly dangerous places, where the tarmac was hard, the dinner ladies were fearsome, and broken bones were just part of growing up. We're the last generation who played British Bulldog until someone needed stitches, who carried marbles so heavy they wore holes through our coat pockets, and who knew that the distinctive clack, clack, clack of banned toys echoing across the playground meant someone was about to lose an eye. Before everything changed forever, British playgrounds ran on rules we made ourselves, games that sorted the tough from the timid, and a culture of freedom that would be absolutely illegal today. These are 7 playground games that kids don't play anymore. And once you hear why they vanished, you'll understand why childhood itself can never be the same. Let's start with number 7, Stuck in the Mud. This was the genius variant of tag, where being caught meant you weren't just out. You were frozen solid, standing there with your legs spread wide apart like you'd stepped in cement. The only way to become unstuck was for another player to crawl under your legs without getting tagged themselves. And that's where it got interesting. Those of us who played it remember the impossible split-second decisions. Do you risk everything to rescue your mate, or do you save yourself and leave them standing there like a scarecrow? You can still feel it, can't you? That moment when you're sprinting full speed and you see your friend frozen 10 feet away, and the person who's it is watching both of you, calculating. Your heart's hammering. Your trainers are squeaking on that hard tarmac, and you've got maybe 2 seconds to decide if you're brave enough. The sensory details were so specific. The rough black tarmac scraping your knees as you dove under someone's legs. The smell of overcooked cabbage wafting from the dinner hall, mixing with the petrichor of rain on playground concrete. The sound of dozens of children's feet pounding across the playground. The screams of, "Quick, quick, crawl under!" And the dinner lady's whistle piercing through it all when someone inevitably fell and scraped themselves bloody. Regional variations made it even better. In Scotland, they called it tunnel tig. Some schools played scarecrow tig, where you froze with your arms stretched out wide. The really cheeky version was toilet tag. You had to crouch down with one arm held out as the flush arm, and your mates had to press it down to free you. Teachers hated that one. But here's what most people don't realise about Stuck in the Mud. It wasn't just a game. It was a social experiment in trust and loyalty that played out every single break time. The popular kids always got rescued first, the ones on the edges of the playground hierarchy. They'd stand there, legs apart, watching everyone run past, slowly realising nobody was coming for them. That stung worse than any scraped knee. The game survived longer than most on this list, but it's fading now. Modern schools don't love the idea of children crawling on playground surfaces covered in who knows what, and there's nervousness about kids diving under each other's legs, concerns that didn't exist when we were playing it. What was normal then would raise safeguarding questions today. That's how much has changed, and that's just number 7. We've barely scratched the surface. Now that you've made it this far, and you're already remembering the feeling of hard tarmac under your knees, the next 6 games are going to hit even harder, because what you're about to discover at number 3 will completely change how you think about why these games disappeared. Number 6 takes us back to autumn. Conkers. If you're old enough to remember Conker season, you can smell it right now, can't you? That distinctive, earthy, slightly bitter smell of horse chestnuts mixed with damp October leaves and the musty scent of parks after rain. September arrived, and suddenly every playground in Britain transformed into a Conker arena where reputations were built and destroyed by shiny brown nuts threaded onto string. The game was deceptively simple. Thread a horse chestnut through a hole, usually made with a meat skewer you'd nicked from your mum's kitchen drawer, tie it to a piece of string, and take turns swinging to smash your opponent's conker to bits. But the social dynamics? That's where it got complex. Those of us who played seriously remember the scoring system like it was yesterday. A virgin conker that destroyed another conker became a oneer. When your sixer defeated someone's threer, you didn't just become a sevener, you inherited their 3 points plus 1 for the victory, jumping straight to a tenner. Playground hierarchies formed around children who possessed 15ers or 20ers. These were battle-hardened chestnuts that had obliterated dozens of challengers. Owning one made you playground royalty. The sensory memories are so visceral they almost hurt. The weight of a perfect conker in your palm, solid, cool, impossibly smooth mahogany brown. The thick, spiky green shells splitting with satisfying thuds on playground tarmac. The cold bite of string against your fingers on frosty October mornings. And that sound, that hollow crack when conkers struck each other clean. Or the deeper, sickening thud when yours shattered into fragments and you watched a week's worth of playground status explode in front of your eyes. Everyone had their secret hardening techniques. Soaking Conkers overnight in malt vinegar was the most popular. Your entire house would reek of it, and you'd get a bollocking from your mum for using all her vinegar. But it might give you an edge. Baking them in the oven on low heat. Storing them in drawers for a year to age, like fine wine. Coating them in clear nail varnish. Whether any of it actually worked was a matter of fierce playground debate. But we all tried it anyway. Here's what really killed Conkers, though. It wasn't just health and safety gone mad, although that played its part. By the 2000s, schools were panicking about everything. Nut allergies, flying chestnuts hitting faces, sharp tools for drilling holes. Insurance companies were having nervous breakdowns over potential liability claims. Some schools made kids wear safety goggles, which became an urban legend that made Britain look ridiculous in the international press. British children forced to wear goggles to play Conkers. The health and safety executive kept saying these were school decisions, not legal requirements, but the damage was done. The deeper truth? When children stopped playing outside unsupervised, the oral tradition died. The older kids, who used to teach the younger ones the rules, the scoring system, the hardening techniques, that chain broke. And without that transmission across year groups, Conker culture simply vanished. You can't revive it with a PowerPoint presentation from a well-meaning teacher. It only worked because we owned it. 5 games down, 2 to go. And what's coming next, number 5, connects directly to what we just talked about with Conkers in a way you probably never realised. It's about the same thing. A whole playground economy that ran on its own rules, where fortunes were won and lost, and where your reputation could be destroyed in seconds. Number 5, marbles. Spring arrived in British playgrounds with absolute certainty, not because of weather, but because marbles appeared. And if you weren't there, you cannot imagine how seriously we took it. Those of us who played remember the weight. A full bag of marbles dragging down one shoulder of your school bag all day. The cold, smooth glass warming slowly in your palm as you decided which marble to risk. The distinctive clink and click in your pocket, a sound that announced you were a serious player. The playground economy was ruthless. Standard marbles were basic currency. Fancies with multicoloured swirls inside were worth 3 or 4 standards. Could command 5, but the ultimate treasures, steelies, ball bearings from your dad's garage that could smash glass marbles to powder. A rare steely could command 10 standard marbles in trade. Regional vocabulary proved where you were from instantly. Leicester had prits and kongs. Yorkshire and Lancashire called them tors and bottle washers. Used the wrong terminology in the wrong playground, you'd be marked as an outsider immediately. The games came in 2 categories. Friendly was for showing off collections, but keepsies for keeps, that's where fortunes were won and lost. Winner takes every marble knocked from the ring. No crying, no asking for them back. The sensory details burn into memory, kneeling on hard tarmac until your knees were scraped raw. The satisfying crack when you hit another marble dead centre. Light catching the swirls inside fancies, making them glow like jewels. That moment of sick horror when you watched someone steely smash your best fancy to fragments. The game wasn't remotely fair. Older boys would challenge younger kids, taking their best marbles through sheer skill advantage. Parents complained about holes worn through coat pockets, about children coming home in tears because they'd lost everything in one disastrous game. What killed marbles was the slow death of outdoor culture. When screen time replaced break time, marbles quietly disappeared. The elaborate rules, regional variations, trading culture, all required oral tradition, passed from older children to younger. When that chain broke, marble culture died with it. We're past the halfway point now, and if you stop watching here, you'll miss the absolute peak of this story. Because number 4 is where the government actually stepped in, where children were genuinely injured badly enough that authorities seized hundreds of thousands of these things. This is where it gets properly dangerous. Number 4, Clackers. Those of you who were there, you're already wincing. That's the correct response. 2 hard acrylic plastic balls, suspended on string attached to a finger tab. Through rapid wrist motion, you made them swing in a figure 8, smashing together above and below your hand, and the sound, clack, 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 like rapid gunfire echoing across entire playgrounds. If you could keep the rhythm going, you achieved instant celebrity status. The craze timeline was breathtaking. American manufacturer Mike Brown sold 1 million by March 1971. Mid-1971, the craze jumped the Atlantic. British factories rushed production. Every child wanted them. Clackers briefly eclipsed hula hoops as the must-have toy. Then they started exploding. The hard plastic shattered under repeated impact, sending sharp fragments flying like shrapnel into children's faces. Bruised wrists, black eyes, bloody noses. Eye injuries from fragments. Schools banned them throughout 1971. By 1976, officially declared a mechanical hazard. As late as 1985, authorities were seizing banned clackers labelled shatterproof that shattered anyway. By January 1972, the craze collapsed. The Liverpool factory was left with 500,000 unsold units and sacked 170 workers. The toy that dominated playgrounds for 18 months vanished overnight. Clackers are the perfect symbol of the era. Adults saw a toy. Children saw status. Nobody thought about safety until injuries piled up. Bang, banned, game over. That cycle, freedom, injury, prohibition, played out again and again until there was almost nothing left. And that brings us to the top 3. Only 3 games left. And these are the ones that didn't just disappear. They were actively hunted to extinction. This is where you'll understand what was really lost. Starting with number 3. If you've made it this far, you need to see this through because this is where everything we've been building to comes together. Number 3, Marbles' forgotten cousin, Kirby. Most people have never heard of Kirby, and that's a shame, because it was brilliant. It started as a working-class street game in 1960s Nuneaton, when children discovered the satisfying bounce when a ball hit the curb edge just right. 2 players stood on opposite curbs across a quiet residential road. You threw a football, aiming to hit the opposite curb edge cleanly. If it struck and bounced back, without touching ground first, you scored and moved to the middle for easier shots. The sensory memories are so specific. The thunk of ball hitting concrete curb. The satisfaction when you got the angle exactly right. The smooth cold of the football in your hands on autumn evenings. The smell of petrol and tarmac. Orange sodium streetlights making everything look sepia. Your mum's shout 3 doors down, "Tea's ready!" Advanced rules added proper drama. Catching your own bounce, one-handed earned bonus throws. Catching your opponent's bounce stole their turn. Special throws had names: pooper scoop, through your legs backwards, 1-2, one-handed overarm. The absolute maddest was French Kirby. If your ball bounced back over a passing car, you got 15 points. Worth risking your football for. Regional variations were fierce. Liverpool played with tennis balls and never used the middle-of-road rule. Scotland had its own scoring. Northerners and Southerners argued over authentic rules with playful rivalry. Your version was the correct version. Here's what killed Kirby: cars. Through the 1960s and 70s, working-class residential streets had light enough traffic that children playing in roads was normal. By the 80s and especially 90s, car ownership exploded. Streets that once saw 10 cars an hour now had 10 cars a minute. Parents stopped feeling comfortable with children playing in roads. The game moved to playgrounds briefly, but lost its soul. It needed the street, the curbs, the territorial ownership of your road. Sanitised playground versions with portable plastic curbs appeared in the 2000s, but that was like serving fish and chips on fine china. Kirby represents something important that's been forgotten. Working-class children owning public space. The street was their territory, their playground, their kingdom from tea time until the streetlights came on. That sense of ownership, of belonging to a place, and that place belonging to you, modern children simply don't have. They're supervised in designated play areas with approved equipment. The freedom to play in your street until your mum shouted you in for tea, that's gone forever. 2 games left, and if you thought Kirby showed how working-class children lost their territory, wait until you see number 2. Because number 2 wasn't about streets. It was about turning the playground itself into a battlefield. And the injuries? They make everything we've covered so far look tame. But number 2 is just the warm-up for number 1, the game that every single person who grew up in this era either loved or feared, and that defined what physical courage meant to an entire generation of British children. Number 2, Red Rover. This one barely existed in Britain, more popular in America, but some British playgrounds adopted it, and when they did, the injuries were spectacular. 2 teams lined up facing each other, linking arms as tightly as possible. Teams took turns calling, "Red Rover! Red Rover! Let Harry come over!" The named player ran at full speed trying to break through the linked arms. Success meant bringing one player back to your team. Failure meant joining the opposing team. The collisions were brutal. Broken arms from impact, dislocated shoulders from being yanked backwards, bloody noses, broken teeth. And the deliberate cruelty. Older children would raise linked arms at the last second, creating a clothesline effect that caught runners across the neck and face. A 2013 California lawsuit resulted in £15,000 settlement after a broken leg. That sealed its fate. But Red Rover's relative rarity in Britain meant it never achieved cultural dominance. It reveals the class consciousness of British playground culture, though. Red Rover required massive asphalt playgrounds that comprehensive schools had. Private schools with manicured playing fields rarely played it. The game was working class, state school culture. When it vanished, nobody mourned it much. Unlike marbles or Conkers, Red Rover had no deep tradition, no regional variations, no cultural transmission across generations. It appeared briefly, caused carnage, and disappeared. Which brings us to number one, the game. The one that defined everything. If you played it, you know. If you didn't, you spent your entire childhood either grateful or ashamed. You were never called to prove yourself. This is the game that sorted an entire generation into categories they never fully escaped. One game left. And this is the one that explains everything we've been building toward. Which brings us to number one, British Bulldog. If you played British Bulldog, you knew genuine fear. Not safe fear of horror films. The real fear that comes from watching 30 children charging at you while you stand in the middle trying to take them down. The rules were simple and brutal. 1 or 2 bulldogs started in the middle. Everyone else lined up at one end. When the bulldog shouted, "British Bulldog," the stampede began. Bulldogs tried to grab runners, tackle them, hold them still while shouting, "British Bulldog! 1, 2, 3! Court players became bulldogs. The gauntlet grew larger and more violent until only one runner remained. The sensory memories are burned in, the thunder of feet pounding on tarmac. Genuine fear-laced screams, the smell of fierce sweat and playground dust. That silent moment before the charge when you could hear your own heartbeat. The impact when bodies collided at full sprint. The sting of tarmac scraping skin. The metallic taste of blood from a bitten tongue. The dinner lady's whistle when someone needed actual medical attention. The British Medical Journal documented a cervical spine injury in 1985, noting the game can be as dangerous as rugby football. The 1941 Boy Scout notes stated, "British Bulldog is not just a roughhouse, but more or less a declaration of war." The game's dangers were well documented, with serious injuries occurring over the years. The most serious incidents involved children sustaining significant harm, even when they weren't directly participating in the game itself. But here's what you need to understand. We loved British Bulldog, not despite the danger, because of it. This was the game that established hierarchy. Being the last uncaught runner brought legendary status that lasted all term. Being caught first carried shame that followed you for weeks. The game embodied the culture of hardness that characterized working-class British masculinity. Proving you could take a hit and keep running, that mattered. The patriotic name wasn't accidental. The British Bulldog spirit that built the empire and inspired victory over Nazi Germany that year, that's what it symbolized. Toughness, resilience, never backing down. The culture that celebrated taking it on the chin. British Bulldog was that culture in game form. By 2011, more than 25% of teachers surveyed said British Bulldog had been banned at their schools. Not by law, there was never a legal ban, but by individual school decisions driven by insurance companies, fear of litigation, and serious incidents. Here's the uncomfortable truth. British Bulldog didn't just test physical courage, it sorted children into categories: the tough, the weak, the brave, the cowardly. Once you were sorted, that label stuck. The children who couldn't compete physically, who got hurt easily, who were smaller or weaker. British Bulldog was brutal for them, not character building, just brutal. So when we mourn the loss of British Bulldog, what are we actually mourning? The game itself? The freedom? Or a culture that valued physical toughness so highly, it was willing to accept regular injuries and occasional serious harm as the price? Those were 7 British playground games that kids don't play anymore. And if you made it all the way through, you now know something most people will never understand. But you do. It wasn't just health and safety. It wasn't just screens or helicopter parenting. It was all of it simultaneously. A perfect storm that transformed childhood itself between the 1980s and 2010s. We were the last generation who played outside unsupervised until the streetlights came on. The last to carry marbles that wore holes through our pockets. The last to know genuine physical freedom mixed with genuine physical danger. Modern children live in a different world. Safer, yes. More supervised, absolutely. But also with less freedom, less autonomy, less ownership of their own childhood. The idea of children ruling their own playground kingdoms by their own laws, that's not just gone, it's incomprehensible. Professor Helen Dodd's 2020 study said it perfectly. British children have been subject to a gradual, creeping lockdown over at least a generation. What was lost? Physically, resilience, risk assessment. Socially, self-organised groups, conflict resolution without adults. Culturally, regional traditions, collective memory that united generations. And we can't get it back. The conditions that produced these games don't exist anymore. We've decided children need protection more than freedom. Maybe we're right, maybe we're wrong. But the decision's been made. What remains are memories. The crack of Conkers, the weight of marbles, the clack of banned toys, the adrenaline of charging across hard tarmac, knowing someone's going to get hurt. The freedom. For those of us who were there, this was simply childhood. For those who weren't, it's almost impossible to believe it ever existed. Drop a comment telling me which game you remember most clearly. What's the sensory detail that still lives in your body decades later? Thanks for remembering with me. See you in the next one.